Everybody, this is Dominic Scafidi, Digital Marketing Specialist here at Axcient. Thank you for joining our Chain-Free 2020 Experience webinar today, presented by your friends here at Axcient. Just let's wait a couple minutes, maybe 1 to 2 minutes here to have people take their virtual seats, and we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience. All right, we can go ahead and get started here. So once again, thank you for joining the Chain-Free 2020 Experience presented by Axcient. So going to introduce our special guest today. First off, we're joined by a very special guest, definitely the founding father of BDR, Andrew Benzinger. In 2006, Andrew invented BDR and has since been issued nearly a dozen patents in the space. Andrew has consulted with several vendors to create their own BDR platforms, including the devices, data center, and cloud repositories and sales strategies. In 2012, Andrew founded Rollups LLC, a nearline business continuity BDR software platform, and successfully exited to Axcient. Prior to entering the backup space, Andrew owned a successful MSP in the Washington, D.C. area. Andy, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And followed by Andy, we have Corey Hintz. Corey Hintz has worked at Axcient for nearly 5 years and also worked with Andrew when he spent time here at Axcient eFolder. He specializes in BDR technologies. Prior to Axcient, Corey worked for an MSP as an NOC admin and a tech support engineer. Prior to entering the channel, Andy served in the United States Air Force as a flight engineer. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Corey and Andy. And strap in for a riveting presentation here on Chain-Free.
Perfect. Thanks, Dom. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your time coming here. I really appreciate it. So Chain-Free backup technology, some key features and overview items I'd like to go over today. I just want to just kind of highlight a few things. There are no chain dependencies to break. That is one of the major value adds to Chain-Free tech in general. So each backup is independent of each other. No chain dependencies, no kind of other reliant protocols needed for each backup for them to function properly. There is no redundant copies of data. I will go into more detail on all these here throughout the meeting. And then there's no synthetic or consolidation files being created, needed to maintain chain integrity, again, because there is no chain to maintain. And then we're also just going to go over just some other highlights revolving around Chain-Free technology and what other types of capabilities that it offers. One of those being able to remove any kind of backup or recovery point for any kind of reason that you might end up having in the future. And then on top of that, your snapshots are actually going to be stored in a native virtualizable state. So each snapshot is actually going to be stored in a virtual hard drive within Rollups. So to virtualize, you are simply needing to just turn them on. There is no need to convert or export any kind of data in order to virtualize the system. Again, they are stored in a native virtualizable state, so you just simply click on. And then there is also no requirement to reseed any kind of data to your data center or the offsite destination. So a lot of other chain-based backup technologies require some annual reseed or even a quarterly, synthetic kind of quarterly roll-up reseed operation where you need to seed the data from your place of business, to the offsite destination, the data center, or the colo, whatever that might end up being. If you go to the next slide, please. So before going to down the weeds a little bit with chain-based technology, I just want to go over chain-free technology, I do want to go over some chain-based technologies. So there are two main types. You have the forward-based chain and then the inverse-based chain. These are going to be the most predominant in the space. You may already know of a few solutions that are using these types of chain architectures. But just to kind of explain just really quick, just kind of how they work and really what this means. On the left-hand side here, you see a forward chain. This is basically depicting that you have your base image shown here by the larger hard disk item here, and then you have the subsequent incrementals after that base image. And all those go forward with time. So on the left-hand side, you have your initial full or base image and then subsequent incrementals. That's all fine and dandy up until one of those snapshots goes corrupt. Then you effectively break all chain integrity. And from that point on, every snapshot is essentially unusable. There's a chance that you might be able to recover those, but either way, it's going to be a pretty bad day to try to remedy this issue, if at all. And on the right-hand side, you have the inverse chain. So similar to the forward chain on the left, the major difference is your full or base image is going to be constantly pointed to your most recent snapshot in line. So if you have any corrupt backups, you would essentially lose older data. So one kind of time frame scenario here, if you want to wrap your heads around this for me real quick. With the forward chain, if you have a January through June timeline, and if you have a snapshot or a backup in March that were to fail, with a forward chain, you would lose everything from March and newer. It is gone. So all of your most recent changes, all of your more recent system states, file changes and whatnot, all of those are essentially gone. So you would only have access to what you had 3 months ago and older from January till March. Now, conversely, on the inverse chain side of things, you'll notice that the base image, the full image, is on the right-hand side. So using that same time frame, going from January to June time frame, if you had that same backup in March that were to fail, instead of losing everything after March, you would lose everything before March. So you would have, April, May, and June still intact, but you would lose all historical, all archival data. All that would essentially be useless. Next slide, please. And then just moving into chain-free based architecture. So essentially, it's still going to take a full backup, still going to be taking incrementals, but that's where the similarities pretty much end. Now, when I say full backup, that does not mean that is similar or going to be the same as a base image with chain-based architectures. It is just a full backup. That's just the initial grab of that data, and it's going to be again, free of any kind of dependencies to any other backups that you have living in Replicate. There are still going to be incremental backups. So that's just basically just taking the incremental changes from the previous backup till your current backup. Each recovery point is independent. I can't say this enough. So again, if you have any reason why you need to remove a snapshot, whatever, if there was bad data going in, if there was a database that you backed up that you don't necessarily need to recover ever again, or you need to restart some processes, whatever scenario you want to kind of throw in there, you are able to manually delete any snapshot within Replicate without any adverse side effects whatsoever. You're also very easy very easy to virtualize faster. So as I was saying before, each snapshot is stored in a native virtualizable state. So virtualization process is drastically faster. You simply just tell Replicate how many virtual CPU cores you would like to assign, how much RAM you would like it to be assigned, and you hit start, and the process is very, very quick from there. It is also going to have the ability to actually do differential scans. So a lot of other solutions on the market have a real problem with this. So chain-based architectures historically had trouble sensing if there was a need to do a new, quote-unquote full or a differential backup. One prime scenario for this, if you're backing up a VM and that virtual disk that was assigned to that VM, changes in size. So if it changes from 100 gigs to 150 gigs, historically chain-based architectures have a really hard time, to be aware of that, let alone back that up. And then if it does back that up, it's essentially going to make a separate full backup of all that data. So you are then introducing now duplicated data very, very heavily to your overall data set, just leading to a lot of data blows and a lot of storage needs that you would need in your actual local backup repository. So with Replibit, it has the ability to automatically sense whenever a virtual hard disk has been expanded. It will do a differential scan just to basically get a bitmap sector drawing of that hard disk, how it looks, and then it's just going to basically be the size of a normal incremental, but it's just going to make basically a new drawing of that hard disk on how it looks with its new expanded storage. And then on top of that, the other benefits to chain-free architecture is there is no consolidation files needed. So a lot of other chain-based technologies out there, they are needing to do very regular consolidation functions. So consolidated daily, consolidated weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, so on and so on. And that was essentially implemented to mitigate the amount of links or backups in your backup chain. So, because essentially it's going to be Murphy's Law. Once you start introducing, more and more and more, backups to your backup chain, you're, really increasing the risk of one of those links, going corrupt or unusable for whatever reason. And then you run into a broken chain, then you run into data loss. It's just a bad day. So they basically, to mitigate that, they introduce consolidation, processes. Which is, all fine and dandy, but in the process of doing that, you're also creating a lot of excess storage, a lot of excess growth. And Andy here is going to go into more detail to those consolidation processes here in a minute. So with Replibit and chain-free architecture, there's no need for any kind of consolidation function, period, because it is not needed. There's no chain to mitigate the amount of links in, just quite simply because it is not needed in our world. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andy here.
Thanks, Corey. I really appreciate that, and thanks for going over the notions of chain-based versus chain-free. And it kind of begs the question of why do I really care about this? And it goes back to the initial creation of the BDR. So when we were first putting BDRs together years and years ago, we were solving a very different problem. And the problem was, how do I get my data off-site in an efficient manner? How do I have local copies of it that can be restored very quickly? And how can I get that stuff restored in the cloud very quickly? And that was the premise behind the BDR. And I think we achieved that pretty well, except we created a lot of problems. We didn't have any information to anticipate the issues associated with chain-based architecture over years and years of data sets and thousands of deployments. So back in 2012, I kind of set under the task of, how can we eliminate these problems? And that's when I came up with, well, let's get rid of chains. So on the next few slides, I want to go over some visual representations of what this really means and how this affects, your day-to-day life and the recoverability of data and how you're going to size the devices you need to put in the field and things to think about when you're working with different products out there that are chain-based versus chain-free. So this screen is just a Windows screenshot of File Explorer of a chain-based technology. I could have picked any one, so I just grabbed a screenshot of one. And as you can see here with the green arrow, this is the full image. This is the base image taken on the initial backup of an E volume, and it's about 2.3 gigs in size. Now, when I initially took this screenshot, I wasn't anticipating this. I kind of just stumbled into it. Corey had mentioned Replibit's ability to do a copy on write differential when volume sizes change or things of that nature. This particular product, when this backup was taken, didn't have that ability. So as you see, what I think occurred here, and this is pure speculation because this is just a random backup that I took, the initial backup was taken, and then I think somebody modified a virtual hard drive. They were backing up a VM. They probably expanded out the volume, then the next incremental fired off, and it basically took another full backup. So we basically doubled our data sets right from the get-go. And then as the day carries on, these are the rest of the intradaily incrementals that occurred during the day. So, on day one, we have our full, and then we have our intradaily incrementals. represented by these other arrows. And then at the very end of the day, we have our consolidated file. Depending on the product you're using, they're either called synthetics or consolidated or roll-ups. And depending on your retention policy, you will have these at the end of every day. And after a given period of time, you'll have them at the end of every week, and then the end of every month, and then the end of every year. Some products out there at the end of the year recommend starting all over again because you don't want too many of these files growing and growing and growing over time. So on an annual basis, you have to start this process all over. That requires a reseeding of the data sets, rolling a truck, copying stuff off the USB and shipping it off to your data center. So in one day, we have all these files created. What does that really mean in sizing out your devices for 3 to 5 years of use in the field? It means you need really big devices. So let's just do the math on this. I'm going to exclude the initial image. I'm just going to talk about the incrementals for the day. Given into consideration a disk size change, or if somebody actually just uploaded a lot of information to the server, the backup was taken, and then they removed it, and then you have your next incrementals occurring through the day. But as you can see, in this one day, we have 3.5 gigs of change, and then we have our initial. So in one day, I have 7 gigs of change. Now, back to the point of this daily incremental, synthetic, or consolidated file. That is the size, basically, of all of the incrementals through the day. So every single day, you have 2 entire sets of backups that should equal roughly the same amount of size. So you're doubling your data requirements every single day. And then as you add weeklies to it, monthlies and yearlies to it, those numbers grow out exponentially. So the devices in the field, a lot of times you hear recommendations 3, 4, and 5 times the native data for an average retention policy. In chain-free, this notion doesn't really exist. When we take the initial backup in a chain-free architecture, and Corey mentioned this before, these are actually kept in a native virtualized state. You guys are lucky you're going to get a sneak peek at the new GUI or interface that's going to be released a little bit down the road. And this is what it looks like. You're part of a select few. But what I have here is, if you look at the center screen, it says volumes, and I just have a single GPT volume here. It's disk 0, and on that I have my EFI partition, my Windows C partition, and then extended partitions with your logical GPT volumes on it for your data sets. On the right-hand side, we give you the GUID information, original disk space information and use space, because when doing a recovery, you never know when that information comes in handy. But what you'll notice is we'll take those individual partitions, whether they're primary or extended, and convert those into virtual hard drives, wholly independent of its original data sets. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. I'll cover that in a second, but I just want to show you that we will split each of those partitions out into their own individual volumes for different recovery scenarios. Now, this is under the new GUI, what the recovery points look like. So in this case, the backups were running whenever they occurred with the timestamp on the left side, and it tells you the status. Was that backup good and verified? You get a green checkbox on it. In use, I'll cover that in a second. How much data changed in that particular recovery point compared to the previous recovery point. And then we have the ellipses on the right-hand side, and that gives me the different functions I can perform on each individual recovery point. Now, if you look at the graph on the images on the right with chain-based versus chain-free, you'll notice under chain-based, whether it's traditional or whether it's an inverse, it's in a linear fashion, but under chain-free, these are independent recovery points, which leads back to this in-use section in the center of the screen with the 3 green checkboxes. Because every single recovery point is wholly independent of one another, I can perform different functions against every recovery point for a different particular scenario. So in this case, I actually have 3 separate recovery points in use of the exact same machine being backed up. And you can't do that in traditional chain-based architectures because you need exclusive access to that entire linear sequence of backup sets. In our world, it becomes irrelevant. So you'll notice here that I've highlighted with the blue arrow, I can delete that very first recovery point. In fact, I could delete any of these recovery points. It will not affect any other point in time. In fact, I could have a virtual machine, an emergency virtual machine running on this device, let's say that 10:04 at 9 a.m., and I could delete a recovery point before it or after it while that VM is running, and it will not affect its ability to reconstitute the data and function as a VM. You don't have to stop it. You don't have to pause it. You don't have to do anything to it. It does not affect any of those recovery points. You can also do multiple things in different disaster scenarios. And one of the most important things I've learned over time is during a disaster, it is extremely important to have multiple paths to data recovery during the given moment in time. Because invariably Murphy's Law kicks in and certain things are going on, or there are different requirements that are going on during that emergency. So for example, a file server goes down and you want your end user customers to be able to access that data as quickly as possible. You can select the most recent point in time or the second to most recent point in time and mount that as a nice SCSI volume and present it to the entire network where people can, access all the files while you're doing a BMR from another point in time. And when that BMR is complete, you just copy the few files that changed back to the new machine. So it gives you a whole host of flexibility during that emergency process. Now, having independent recovery points also changes how the retention policy works. And this is important with scaling out devices over time, because you got to remember, when you're putting hardware or an appliance, a BDR appliance at a customer location, it's going to be there for 3 to 5 years. And if you made a mistake in the sizing, it's a very expensive fix. So in that chain-based architecture, you're locked into carrying that chain out for whatever your retention policy is. And as I mentioned before, you're going to have your initial backup sets every single day, double that for your consolidated at the end of the day, triple it on a weekly basis for your weekly consolidated, 4 times for monthlies. And depending on your policy, you could have 10 times your native data in these backup sets. Because the chain-free technology allows for independent recovery points, we actually operate under a first-in, first-out basis on the deletion of data sets for your retention policy. Now, I'm showing you an advanced one, and I'll get to that in a second, but a very basic retention policy is keep every single recovery point for 6 months. If you're running, backups 4 or 6 times a day, you could have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of recovery points if you keep 6-month retention policy and keep everything in there. And then under the first in, first out topology of these retention policies, once you hit 6 months and a day, we will delete anything that is older than 6 months. And then on day 6 month and 2, we will delete anything that is older 6 months and 1 day. So as new data comes in, we drop the data off the back end, so you can maintain the size of your backup set for years and years and years and still have that level of recovery. If you have some sort of compliance regulation going on with a particular end user, you can use this advanced set. And once again, this is an exclusion list where you can set different criteria, and you don't have to have all of these criteria filled out. But in this scenario, I'm saying keep every single backup I have, whether it's 24 times a day or 4 times a day, and on those backups do a first in, first out. Independent of that, keep the last backup of the day for 2 weeks and do a first in, first out rotation on that one, and the last one for the week. Every 6 weeks, do a first in, first out, and you can keep 6 months, the last backup of the month for 6 months. And then you have an option to keep the last snapshot of the year. And if that is not checked, it will keep them in perpetuity, or you can automatically delete it and go back to your regular retention policy here. But each one of these is handled independently as an exclusion list. In other words, delete every single recovery point on the device that does not meet this criteria. And this also holds true for your offsite cloud vaults as well. And the retention policy on your cloud vaults is wholly independent of the retention policy on your local device. So depending on how you position the product or how you want to actually just for business purposes maintain it or deal with cost structures, you can say to your end user, we're going to keep lots and lots of retention policy locally, but we're only going to give you, 2 weeks or 30 days worth in the cloud to keep your costs down. And you can modify that in either direction or have them both very extensive or both very short, whatever meets your business need for the given particular customer. So with that said, I'm going to hand that back to Corey to talk a little about the data flow within Replibit.
Perfect. Yeah, so as you guys can see here, I just want to take a second to go over just the overall data flow, just from start, to offsite destination. So of course, your backup data set is going to come from your actual local servers, local workstations, desktop. It doesn't matter if they're physical or virtual systems. So again, you're able to back up, servers, workstation, OSs, virtual or physical. It does not matter. Those are going to be essentially backed up to your BDR appliance. And then from there, it's going to be handling all of its local retention policies that you might have built. On top of that, it's going to be doing a lot of its virtualization, checks. So every single night, Replibit will do a variety of different data integrity checks. And during that process, it's going to virtualize your last snapshot of every single day, and it's going to run through a few key data integrity checks. One of those being a check disk, the other one being a heartbeat scan. Just to make sure that the hypervisor in Replibit has full access to the underlying VM and essentially telling you if that VM booted up correctly or not. And you will receive the notifications for every step of that. So if there's anything negative, if a VM did not test successfully, or if there was the check disk were to fail, anything like that, you would receive notification for that immediately.
Corey, don't we even take that down to verifying that the VSS services are functioning on application servers as well, so they'll be notified about that?
That is correct, yes. Yeah, we do. So there's about 5 or 6 different, core data integrity checks being done during this process. There are more, but for the most part, about 5 or 6 main ones, and one of those is a VSS provider check. So, and we will actually do data integrity check inside the VM, not just looking at your backup data from the outside, within Replibit, which we do that also. But we are doing the data integrity checks inside your backup data, inside the VM while it is being virtualized in the appliance. So it's going to be doing a real-time VSS provider check. It's going to be doing a system file check. It's going to be doing a heartbeat check. And a lot of these are done literally inside the VM as it is running inside Replibit. Which a lot of other solutions in the market don't necessarily do that.
Corey, can I jump in to emphasize this a little bit? So, and I apologize. We did this on purpose, not only having to do with data integrity, because at the end of the day, that's probably the most important thing, but it really has to do with what I call the crisis curve. Somebody losing their data doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis. It's a crisis when you go to recover the data or get the customer up and virtualized or whatever it may be, and you run into issues. That's when you turn to crisis mode, and nobody, no MSP out there or no engineer wants to live that way. So we kind of flipped everything around and said, if we give you enough proactive information about the state of your backups on a daily basis, you can mitigate that crisis before it ever happened. So let's say we do the boot VM check every single night and we can virtualize that system. That's fine and dandy. But let's say it happens to be an application server running SQL and the VSS providers on it aren't functioning properly after it's been virtualized. That could be a disastrous crisis for you because number one, you're going to be scrambling trying to fix VSS, on your SQL server. 2, it is invariably on a Friday night at 11 p.m. or Saturday at 3 in the afternoon, and nobody wants to be dealing with this. So if you are notified, if you check your information in our management portal on a daily basis, or the alerts that we fire off or we integrate into ticketing systems, first thing every morning, very quickly, and check the status of this, it gives you an opportunity to fix it before it becomes a problem. Backups fail for various reasons. There could be a window update and they made a modification to VSS and your scheduling for the updates doesn't allow for the reboot to occur until the weekend. You will get VSS errors, but as long as those align with your reboot schedules and you know about this, you can go ahead and ignore that. If that's not the case, you now have time to mitigate it before it actually becomes a problem. So we really try to put you on the front end of the crisis curve and not be reactionary at the moment of crisis. If you solve it before it's a problem, it never is a problem. It may be an inconvenience, but nobody's sweating bullets over an inconvenience. Sorry, Corey.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a very valid point. Replicate will put you into a very proactive stance when it comes to your data integrity for your backups. So in short, if there's one thing I want you to take away from the data verification process with Replicate is you will have up to the day status on your virtualizable state for the entire client. So every single day. So you will get a screenshot and a variety of other notifications if anything fails, things like that every single day. So it'll be done automated. You won't need to manually check or do that process. It'll do it for you. So as Andy was saying before, going back to the overall data flow, kind of process here, your BDR appliance is going to have its own retention policy that could be sent to something as simple as keep everything for 30 days. Or you can make it very granular and build more of a custom tailored retention policy. Keep however many snapshots for X amount of days, and then after 7 days or 14 days or whatever it might be, keep the last snapshot of the day, and so on for months and so on for years. And something else that wasn't really shown before, and I apologize that wasn't really we didn't have basically the image for it, is you're able to have retentions go beyond yearly as well. So you can have a multi-year retention very, very easily with Replicate. A lot of other solutions in the market really kind of fall short when it comes to the capability of being able to have longer retention periods, multi-year retentions. So if you have any HIPAA or any kind of PCI or legal or financial, client or regulatory needs like that, where you need those multi-year retentions, chain-free architecture is very easily the best way to go to achieve those longer retentions. Just again, because there's no consolidation process needed, no annual rebase is needed, no reseed is needed. So if you do have a specific requirement for multi-year retention, chain-free architecture is going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to doing that. And then from the BDR appliance, the overall data flow, you're able to go to our cloud. And something else, you're also able to host the offsite destination in your own data center. So if you do happen to have access to your own data center or your own colo, you are able to actually build out a Replicate vault in your own data center using our hardware or your own hardware. It does not matter. It's entirely up to you, to your own preference. And you are able to actually achieve your retention policies, your vault functions, everything in your own data center or ours. In addition to that, you're able to do both simultaneously or multiple vaults. So you are able to replicate to multiple vaults simultaneously if you do have that specific need. And then just elaborating a little bit further on our cloud, you do have the ability, of course, to download any kind of backup data that you might need from our cloud, whether it's just one single file like a Word doc or whatever it might be, all the way up to downloading full images of your servers, and any subsequent drives that you might need. From within that. If you have a very large data requirement, recovery need, we do offer disk shipment as well. So that is available to you. And then below that, you have the ability, of course, to virtualize or to recover in our cloud. And you're able to virtualize in our cloud as long as needed. So if you do have a site-wide disaster locally, fire, flood, or whatever scenario you want to throw in there, you are able to virtualize in our cloud essentially indefinitely, for weeks, months at a time if needed. We have had, clients in the past, of course I can't say any names, who this was, but, due to certain hurricanes, over the years, we had one of our clients that was essentially flooded out, and they had to virtualize in our data center for about 8 months straight. And they were able to keep business continuity up and running for that entire period with, of course, there was an inconvenience because their actual local factories, were definitely hindered, during this. But they didn't go bankrupt. They were able to maintain business continuity for 8 months in our data center, and then we also assisted, getting all that data back down to their new office or factory, whatever it might be. But it was really, really nice to see that we were able to provide that level of service for them, pretty much effortlessly. And then going back down to your own private cloud, you have full control in your own private cloud. So in your own data center or your own colo, you're gonna have the same type of process. We're not gonna be biased one way or the other. Functionality, the same core feature sets are all gonna be the same in your cloud, our cloud. You're able to recover, data from your cloud. You're able to virtualize in your own cloud or your own data center or colo pretty easily. So again, we're not biased either way. It's really whatever specific requirements for data protection needs you might have. And then, so with that, I'm just going to hand it back over here to Andy here real quick, or Dom for some Q&A.
Hey, everybody. We have just a couple questions here. I want to start with one. Do you have to buy Axcient hardware for this kind of chain-free replicate solution, or can you use your own device?
I'll go ahead and take this one, Andy.
Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, so the answer is yes, you are able to utilize your own hardware or our hardware. So you do, of course, have the ability to use our hardware for this, and it's fully warranted, 3 to 5 year warranty standard for our hardware. They're able to be field upgradable. They have lights out management, and a variety of other cool features that are built into those units. But if you do have a preference to use your own hardware, or if you have your own vendor relationship that you prefer, you are, of course, able to use hardware. Replicate is extremely flexible and extremely hardware agnostic. So it is going to be using a Linux-based kernel under the hood. So it does have a lot of hardware agnosticity going on there. So the option is up to you.
Andy, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, one of the things that we want to do was give you the ability to, repurpose old hardware or actually keep your hardware costs down. So in the storage section within ReplicBit, we break it down on larger devices into an operating system drive and for lack of a better term, a RAID set on the storage areas. You don't necessarily need to buy a high-end RAID controller. We use ZFS for the file system, and those of you not familiar with it, it's the open source version of the Sun Solaris copy on write file system that has its own parity bits built in. So if you have a larger unit, you do not have to buy an expensive $1,000 RAID controller. You can just go with a HBA or host bus adapter and plug the hard drives directly into that, and then let us handle the RAID for you, and we can keep your buried entry down because you can save that $1,000 and bypass a RAID controller. We will offer it with a single parity bit or a dual parity bit. It's really the equivalent of RAID 5 or RAID 6. We also offer some other flexibility in there as well. But we really wanted to eliminate, super high price points to get into the space.
Cool. So I have a really good question from Eric here, but before I go to that, I just want to talk real quick here about Axcient. Well, we have some time left in this presentation, so if you could go to the next slide for me real quick. Yes, so we have, you might have heard through the media, through social media, whatever it might be, we have the X360, one experience, one platform where you can access all of the Axcient business continuity and backup and disaster recovery products available just in one portal or one pane of glass. We made this move last year for a couple reasons. If you want to go to the next slide real quick. I guess the number one reason we made this move was because we're thinking about backup and disaster recovery as that last line of defense when it comes to security. That's a quote that our CEO, David Bennett, said, and it's extremely true when you're thinking about this. It is the last line of defense. You can only have so much when it comes to cybersecurity protection. You need to have backed up data, and that data has to be restorable. So finally, we're trying to solve, I guess, 3 problems with this X360 portal, and the first of those is security. So we see news articles coming in daily talking about how MSPs are being directly targeted by ransomware and their end clients as well. So we're trying to offer that last line of defense of security when it comes to your data, your most valuable resource. The second piece here is this migration to the cloud that we've been talking about probably for over a decade, but as we can see today, it's very real. And we're trying to make it easy for businesses to migrate to the cloud and also make it more profitable for them as well. And then finally, it's a complex space that we're living in right now when it comes to vendors. And having all of your solutions in one spot with one bill at the end of the month is going to definitely help instead of managing multiple, even sometimes dozens of different vendors, those relationships can cost employee time and also cause increased costs, which is one of the other things that we're trying to solve with that X360 portal. So finally, I want to get back to Eric's question here. But before we do that, and we're just going to sit on this slide for the rest of the presentation, we do have the opportunity for you to take a 14-day free trial of Replibit. Come experience chain-free for yourself. You'll be walked through an onboarding process. This can be done today. So if you are willing to do that, take that free trial. I highly recommend just trying the solution, clicking around yourself. But bringing it back to the questions here, we have a question from Eric. Do you support different VMs, VMware Hyper-V, and do you support any hyper-converged platforms?
Corey, I can take the first part of that, and the answer is, depending on the scenario, we support lots of different virtualization platforms. Natively built into the Replibit device itself, should you want to do the emergency virtualization on that, we use KVM as the native hypervisor. But so you can virtualize using KVM. But we mentioned before that we keep the data in a native virtual format. What we're actually doing is keeping it as a raw block volume. And those who do a lot of work in virtualization know that raw block volumes are native virtual hard drives for lots of different hypervisors. And with our ability to do an iSCSI mount, we can actually become an iSCSI raw block device to a virtualizer. So if you have like a VMware CPU node. So if we're on the same physical network as your CPU node, you lose your storage, we can act as that native raw block device. We also support NFS share. So we can become an NFS data store to your VMware CPU nodes. My understanding is in Hyper-V, I'm not as good with Hyper-V as I am with VMware, but my understanding is Hyper-V will also support iSCSI raw block devices, so you can boot up natively in that as well for emergency scenarios. But under the NFS share, if I said NFC, I apologize, NFS, we can be that share to you. You can boot up directly into your hypervisor, and then you can actually do a vMotion to your production storage, while you're online if you're properly licensed within VMware for that. And hopefully that answers the question. Corey, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, and to just add to that, in case they were asking specifically about different types of compatibility or coverage in terms of backups. So yeah, we will back up a variety of different hypervisor based VMs. It will back up VMware based VMs. We will back up Hyper-V based VMs and a variety of others. In addition to that, you have the ability to export any of those backups into a variety of virtual image formats that you might need. So if you do have a need to do export of the data, you have the ability to export it to a VMDK or export it to a VHD or VHDX, and so on. You have a lot of freedom in terms of how you want to utilize your backup data. In regards to hyper-converged environments, it really depends. Just because some of those can be configured in just totally polar opposite different types of configurations. Some of them are supported, others not so much. It really depends on how the LUNs are all shared out, the data sets, permissions, those kinds of things. It really depends. I wish I had just kind of a clear yes or no answer, but in this line of work, especially dealing with hyperconverged networks, they're fairly complicated. So it's really on a per case basis to really assess it correctly.
Cool. I think that hopefully answered your question, Eric, and if not, feel free to chat here in the control panel, and we'd be happy to answer. Just another one here. Do I have to host the data offsite in the Axcient cloud, or are there other options out there? Andy?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't know if Corey was going to jump in. No, you don't. We want to be as flexible as possible to be able to meet your particular business needs. So you can, you have to have the local device at the end user location, and that's the primary repository and recovery center for your local servers. And you can choose it to send it to Axcient, but if your business model is you want it to go to your data center, by all means, you can do that. All you need to do is download our ISO image, and we will walk you through an installer. It takes about 10 minutes, and we'll lay down the operating system and all the software you need to turn that particular piece of hardware into your very own vault. And those vaults are multi-tenanted. So you can have many, many end user customers going back to that same vault at your location. And we also support what is called multi-vault replication. So if you do have a customer who wants it at 2 distinct locations and you happen to have rack space at 2, you could stand up 2 vaults and have that same appliance sending data to 2 separate locations, or you could send it to yourself and send it to Axcient, and that's done on a machine by machine basis. So it could be of your, I'm just gonna make up numbers, 50 end user customers or 100 end user customers, you have 2 that want multiple offsite locations. And of those 2, only 1 server each. You could send all the data back to you and those 2 individual servers up to the Axcient cloud or to your secondary location.
And to add to that, thank you, Andy. Replication is also optional. So if you do have a very specific need, to not replicate data at all, it is an optional feature. So you have a lot of freedom with that as well.
Just another question. This one comes from Alex, an existing Axcient partner. When can they expect to see, or when can existing partners expect to see that new UI?
That would be, this year. Yeah, yes. Yeah, so this year, I don't have any firm kind of time frame, but I would say middle of the year, right around there.
Cool. Another one from Eric. Do you support backup of laptops or I guess any other end user devices? Just kind of go into that one.
Yes, we do. Yes, so Replicate will back up workstation operating systems as well as server OSs, laptops, workstations, whatever it might be for the workforce. And it will back it up. It's the same way it will back up a server directly to your Replicate appliance. Same functionality, same virtualization capability, data verification process, everything's the same for workstations as well.
Very cool. Are the vaults multi-tenant? I think this will be our last question.
Yes, they are. So you can have multiple end user customers going back to the same vault, and the data is segregated. So there's the master admin login into the vault where you can see and access all the data, but it's also then segregated by end user customers. So if you actually want to manipulate that data or access the data sets themselves for a particular customer, each customer has a unique username and password combination to be able to access the data there. So you don't have to worry about commingling of data on that multi-tenanted vault.
And just one last quick one here, back to that device question. Paul asks, phones, tablets, iOS, Android, are those also supported?
Corey?
So mobile, tablets, iOS, Android devices are not supported, no. So right now it is only going to be server-based systems, workstation-based systems.
Cool, thank you for clarifying that for Paul. So for everybody that is on here, there will be a recording sent out after this with the presentation and the slide deck. And if you have any questions, I'll also be sending along, I think, Corey's contact information, so you can be able to get in touch with him as well. So with that, Andrew, Corey, any closing remarks for you guys before we get off the line here?
All I can say is this is one of the most, in my opinion, backup and disaster recovery, that's the term in the industry. I like to call it business continuation. It's probably one of the most important things that you can do as an MSP out there. You spend all your time and effort providing great service and building goodwill with your end user. And if you want that to disappear, you miss the mark on a recovery. So no matter what product you go with, and I hope you give us a try, examine it closely and ask yourself, does this put me in a good position to exceed the expectations of my customer, where they can rely on me to ensure that their business will continue in the event of a crisis? Corey, any thoughts?
Corey?
Yeah, just to add to that, if, again, just to emphasize what Dom was saying, if anybody would like to see a demo, I'd be happy to give you guys a demo, walk through, interactive, conversation, and subsequently, if you guys want to walk through a trial, myself or my team will walk through, installing the operating system, showing you the ins and outs, the core features of the solution during that trial, really to get it down and dirty as needed. I'll be happy to help you guys out in any way I can, so please let me know.
And there will be a free trial link in that follow-up email. So once again, thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you, Andy and Corey, for your time. And hopefully everybody has a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.